Hi, everyone, and welcome. I want to remind you to like, share, and subscribe. And I want to remind you that the super chat is open. And tonight we're talking to Tobias Wayland. Hi, Tess. How are you?
Hi, good. Sorry, I have another visitor here. Here's my dog Dazia, who decided to climb
Oh,
on the back of the chair and lick my face. I'm going to see if I can get her to just lie down and be good, and we can continue. Okay, here she goes.
okay. Oh, that's wonderful. I'm happy anytime that one of our pets want to be on the show. That's fine with me. So she is definitely welcome. Oh my goodness. So, so
Yeah,
tonight we're
she is
going
a
to be
sweetheart.
talking about. She seems like it. We're going to be talking about Santa Claus and holiday stories and everything in between. So, do you want to start off by telling everyone who you are, first of all, for anyone who doesn't know you?
Yeah, definitely. So, my name is Tobias Wayland, and I am the head writer and lead investigator for the Singular Fortean Society. And so, what the Singular Fortean Society is a journalistic and investigative organization that was begun by myself and my wife Emily back in 2016. And what we do is, we investigate the paranormal, of course, without specializing in any particular area. But we also, cover like paranormal news, and of course we try to stay active in the community and provide people with sort of a safe place to talk about all of their weird ideas. And so, for anybody not familiar with the word Fortean, that comes from Charles Fort, who was an early 20th century collector of weird news stories. So what Fort would do is he would collect all of these weird news stories from all over the world, and he would compile them in these, comprehensive volumes, and he would speculate about the connections between these phenomena, and also sort of speculate about what might be behind them. And often that was pretty tongue in cheek. He gave us the idea of the cosmic joker to sort of explain why so little of this ends up making any sense. One of his most famous quotes, of course, is "One measures a circle beginning anywhere," which is also one of my favorites because I've always sort of taken that to mean that by studying any aspect of the paranormal, you can understand something about all of it because there are all of these sort of weird connections and commonalities between phenomena. And so that's sort of the approach that we take at the Singular Fortean Society. Is that Fortean, holistic sort of approach to paranormal investigation and research. And so the other word that sometimes people get caught up on is singular, which I do get that. Yes, it can mean one, but no, we don't think we're the only Fortean society out there because, of course, we all know that isn't true. But singular can also mean unique or remarkable. And so really what we're going for is a society of unique or remarkable Forteans. That is to say that we want a place where everybody's perspective is welcome and appreciated because we really think that only by allowing all points of view are we really ever going to be able to move forward in any appreciable way in this field.
Right. And I totally agree with that because if you're just going to sit there and say, well, my way is the right way or my way or the highway, you can't be like that because what works for one can't work for the other. I totally agree with that. So what brought me for the show idea today was, I think it was last year around this time, you were looking for stories for like holiday stories or anything spooky that happened around the holiday. And I thought that'd be a great show idea. Who better to ask than you? So do you want to tell us what you've collected or just anything in general relating to like Santa Claus or around the holidays?
Sure. I mean, we can definitely start with Santa, and I think that is a really good place to start. I think a lot of people probably sort of take Santa Claus for granted today, and see him as this sort of like secular, commercialized figure without really understanding or even trying or wanting to understand his his origins in culture. Now, there's no denying that much of what we see in Santa Claus today comes from Saint Nicholas, who of course was the 3rd century Christian saint, known for his generosity and gift giving. And that's actually where we get the name Santa Claus, because it's the Dutch nickname for Saint Nicholas, actually. So they actually shortened it to something like, I think it was Santa Claus or something. And so when that was brought over to this country, yeah, like it was of course anglicized into Santa Claus, and that's what we call him still today. But interestingly, if you look at a lot of the different aspects of this character, you'll begin to see some very strong connections to pre-Christian figures, most notably Odin. So, for instance, prior to celebrating Christmas on December 25th, Scandinavians and other Germanic peoples would celebrate this holiday called Yule, and this was their sort of like winter solstice celebration, and it was a very popular holiday. And during this time of year, they had what they referred to as the wild hunt. And so the wild hunt was traditionally led by Odin, where he would sort of gather his Valkyries and all this, the souls of the honored dead who dwelled with him in Valhalla, and he would lead this hunt, and it was a particularly dangerous time of year, because while Odin was out and about leading this hunt, he would judge people. Because Odin, of course, is known for wisdom and perception. He has his 2 ravens, thought and memory, that could go out and collect all of this information for him. And so, he knew if you were naughty or nice, frankly. And while he was out leading the wild hunt, right? If you stumbled upon this or interrupted it, you might be judged very severely. Now, something else interesting about that time is, when Odin would lead this wild hunt, of course, he would be riding his 8-legged horse, Sleipnir. And so what children would do is they would take their shoes and fill them with hay and leave them out for Sleipnir, assuming that this poor horse would get hungry at some point, being ridden around so much. And in return, hopefully, Odin would leave them some small gifts, maybe candy or sweets or something. And so, you can see these obvious parallels of this figure who rides around during Yule, which we now basically call like the Christmas season, and he judges people. Now, he might grant favor on you. He was known to be a gift giver himself, in that he would present gifts to people that he liked. And so, if during this time of year Odin judged you favorably, he might gift you with something, whether that be something material or just good fortune. And if he judged you poorly, then you would be out of luck. He would do something bad. And and of course, like I think there are some things that we can look at there too that seem to be very coincidental, but also very interesting. So, like, you look at Sleipnir, for instance. You've got this 8-legged horse, and now we have 8 tiny reindeer, right? And so, like, that number obviously correlates. And kids still leave vegetables and things out for those reindeer, in addition to leaving milk and cookies out for Santa. So there are a lot of parallels between Odin and this wild hunt and in Santa Claus today. And I don't think that it is any kind of coincidence, because, again, Yule was a very, very popular holiday in these Germanic countries. It was most people's favorite holiday. It was during the darkest time of the year, and it was a days long celebration of feasting and drinking and games, and everybody loved it. And when these cultures were being converted to Christianity, I think that was very much recognized, and nobody wanted to take Yule away from anybody, because that would have been tremendously unpopular, and you're not going to talk anybody into converting to anything that way. And so, they sort of folded these traditions into the Christian celebration. And so, people got to keep their traditions. They got to keep their stories, and they were sort of modified over time to be more accommodating to the new religion. But still, a lot of those remnants remain, and you see them all over the place this time of year. Everything from Christmas trees, decorating trees. It goes back, far before Christianity. Although interestingly, the lights on trees actually is something that really wasn't, that we have no real historical record of prior to Christian conversion. But the actual just decorating, as far as ornaments or food or something similar like that goes back much further than Christianity. Of course, there are things like wreaths, for instance, putting evergreen branches and things in your home to sort of represent eternal life or the persistence of life in this period of darkness and death. That's much older than Christianity. Of course, like mistletoe, even, all of these things were incorporated into the Christian celebration, I think, because of their origin in this very popular pagan holiday. And it's something that we still do today. I've got a Christmas tree downstairs. We've got a wreath on our front door. And it just seems like something that a lot of people don't spend a lot of time thinking about. And I'm by no means saying if you celebrate Christmas, you are celebrating a pagan holiday, because obviously the connection to the birth of Christ at this point is very, very strong. And, that of course happened on purpose. And so, I don't want anybody to be offended, by me saying that their Christian celebration is this pagan thing, if that's something that they would find offensive, because, there is obviously a strong connection to Christianity at this point too. I just find it very interesting from a both historical and folkloric perspective, how many of these traditions have survived. I mean, for instance, you can see behind me, I've got a couple of gnomes up there on top of that bookshelf, and those are called Nisser. And what a Nissa is basically this, again, ancient patriarchal spirit, this sort of fairy, really, that would dwell in somebody's homestead. And they were generally thought to be very helpful. If a little capricious, you wanted to stay on their good side. That's like all fairies, right? And they were especially connected to Yule and the Yuletide season. And, it was traditional to leave buttered porridge out for them around Yule. And I guess where I'm going with this is I bought both of those, or I should say Emily and I bought both of those at a Christmas market very, very recently, and they're sort of marketed as Christmas gnomes, or people might refer to them even as elves or something similar. But the reality of the situation is that they are surviving characters from this pre-Christian Yule tradition. And you still see them everywhere, at least here. We have a pretty big Scandinavian population in Wisconsin. And so that probably has something to do with it. But yeah, it's something that a lot of people, I don't think, probably spend a lot of time thinking about, but the stuff is still everywhere. Interestingly enough, Nisser were actually the inspiration for Santa's elves. Santa's elves were invented in the 19th century by some Scandinavian children's authors, and largely based off of Nisser, because the thing about the Nisser is that they have that sort of distinctive look that we often associate, or were traditionally associated with Santa's elves. You know, like the red hat, the brown or green clothing. You know, they were wizened old men. So yeah, you would often see, you know, like big bushy beards and similar. And so yeah, it's just another interesting surviving tradition. And that actually reminds me of another one that is also from Wisconsin, although by way of Scandinavia. And I found this while researching the book that I'm working on now, the Singular Fortean Society's Yuletide Guide to High Strangeness. And that is the tradition of Asgardsrea. Now, I apologize if I mispronounced that, but it's I believe, Norwegian word, and it's not the easiest thing for me to pronounce. But what that is basically is this fairy procession that's supposed to take place on Christmas. Procession of underground people, basically, is what they were referred to as, who would, come, would come up and would kind of have a little wild hunt of their own. You know, it wasn't a hunt specifically, but they would roam the countryside, and you generally didn't want to run into them because very little good could come of it. And I found that in some historical records at the Wisconsin Historical Society. So if anybody isn't familiar, back in the 1930s, during the Great Depression, the federal government sponsored this writers project called the Federal Writers Project. And basically what these writers would do is they would go like just all over, and they would collect bits of folklore, personal histories, like just word of mouth kind of stuff in an attempt to, one, keep writers working because it was the greatest economic disaster in our nation's history, but two, to help preserve the culture of all of these, disparate peoples who had immigrated to this country. And so, like I said before, in Wisconsin, we had a pretty sizable, still do have a pretty sizable Scandinavian and really just Germanic and in general population. And so that was something that made it into this federal writers project. And unfortunately, the person who actually gave that account, like their name has been lost to history, but in the actual entry for it, it's labeled Asgardsrea and then Udestad. And so Udestad actually refers to this farm. Now, after explaining what this fairy procession is, they actually go into this sort of folkloric tale that recounts somebody's experience, with this fairy procession and having to deal with it. And the name of the farm in that story is Udestad. And so I thought, well, it's not uncommon, especially back then, for somebody to associate a place with the name of the family, that lives there, if it's this sort of like generational property or something. And so I looked in the Wisconsin census, which of course goes way back, all the way back to before the 1930s, to see if there was anybody with that last name who lived in Wisconsin that would be on the census. And sure enough, there were several people with that last name of Udestad, and they all lived near the town of Barron. And what's really, and I swear this is going somewhere, what's really interesting about the town of Barron is that it itself is known for having its own fairy procession. So This was all the way back in 1916. There was a man at the time, a teenager, who reportedly saw this group of tiny men. So as the story goes, actually, as it was related to Jerome Clark, who wrote about it for the first time in a 1970 something issue of Fate. I have like an original copy of it right over there, and I could give you the exact date that it came out, but I don't want to have to get up and risk knocking over my computer or something. But anyway, he talked to this guy's wife, who swears up and down that this really happened to this guy, or at least something really happened to him. He had some kind of very powerful, impactful experience. And so anyway, as the story goes, this teenager, he was riding along near Barron, Wisconsin, with his friends and their dad, and their car ran out of oil. However, luckily for them, there was a farmer walking past who had just gotten done fishing, and they asked him if he could help, and he said yes, but somebody has to come with me to my farm and get this oil, because he didn't want to go all the way to his farm and back again. And so this teenager, whose first name was Harry, said, hey, I will go with you. He volunteered. And so off he goes, and he gets the oil, and that all is great. And then he's walking back, and it's dark out by then. The sun is set, and there's this full moon, so he can see pretty well. And as he's passing by this field, he sees this procession of little men, and they were wearing overalls, I believe, and they were making a weird noise. It was like they were mumbling to themselves, like they're all sort of mumbling, but not to each other. And so he sees this, and he's terrified, and so he takes off, and he gets back to the car, and he tells his friends and their dad about it. And of course, he gets laughed at, which is a very common experience, I think, as we all know, unfortunately. And anyway, long story short, after he gets laughed at there, the only people he ever tells about it are his mom and his wife, both of whom swore that this was something that deeply affected him. And so, it's fascinating. And so finding this weird folkloric story of fairy processions, led me to this weird synchronicity of finding, a fairy procession in the state in which I live, in the same area, likely where this original folkloric like tale came from. Which, I mean, if that's not Christmas magic, I don't know what is, honestly.
Yeah, I know. I agree with you. That's amazing. That really is. And to have, because Santa himself is supposed to be an elf, or like a form of an elf, or so they say. Like, not Saint Nicholas, but the Santa Claus, the commercialized Santa Claus.
Oh, sure. So like you'll see him referred to as, a jolly old elf or something. And that's really, that is really interesting. And I guess I haven't really spent enough time thinking about that. I would, I would guess maybe that's come out of his association with, with having these elven helpers. Now, certainly Odin was connected to elves. Now, he wasn't the actual lord of Alfheim was Freyr, so he wasn't Odin or anything. But Odin certainly had plenty of dealings with elves, And if you read the Eddas or anything, there's no shortage of Odin, having dealings with elves or dwarves or any other mythological creatures sort of native to that culture. And so, yeah, I mean, there is a strong connection to fairies. I mean, like I was talking about with the Nisser, certainly. And, there are a lot of other sort of interesting folkloric characters who have come out of that time who are very similar. You know, you can look at like Frau Perkta, for instance, and she's like this Christmas witch, basically, who is supposed to lead a very similar sort of a procession this time of year, although much sadder and grimmer. Like, instead of leading like a fairy procession or the honored dead or something similar, her procession is said to be like the ghosts of dead children. And because there are a lot of like myths and stories that are associated with this time of year that are very, very dark. And so Frau Perkta's thing is she will judge you if you haven't like got all of your leaving done. This is specifically women too, I think. If you haven't got all of your weaving done, or your house isn't like clean enough, then she might disembowel you and like stuff your guts with rocks and straw and then sew it back up, which does not
Jeez.
make for a very, very Christmas.
No, not at all. Jeez.
No, it gets.
Oh my
it
gosh.
gets very
I don't
dark.
like her. I'm just going to say it now. I don't like her. Yeah, it is. So moving from the lore into people actually seeing Santa Claus, or what they perceive as Santa Claus and his reindeer. I've had two experiences myself, one hearing it and one seeing. I can't be 100% if they're reindeer, but there's no way these could be elk, what I saw, because there's no elk out this way. So
Okay.
I don't know if they escaped from a preserve. What happened? I lived up on top of the Laurel, and we were coming back, and it was snowy, and I was with my mom, and we turned in before we got to where we lived. And she was driving and she was talking, and I said, stop. And it was snowing, and she got agitated because she stopped on the slippery road. And she's like, what? I'm like, there's reindeer. There is reindeer. And she's like, no. And she turned, and there were 3 or 4 reindeer just standing off to the side looking at us. And she just looked at me, and she looked at me and then looked back and then just put her hands on them and just drove. She didn't say a word. And I said, did you see that? She's like, I didn't see a thing. I didn't see a thing. You didn't see a thing. I didn't see a thing. I'm like, but those were reindeer. I was little enough. I'm like, those were Santa's reindeer. She's like, I don't know what they were, but we didn't see it. Because it was dark, but it was light enough because of the houses that you could see them. And we never saw them again. And then the second thing was, we found out that Santa wasn't real, right? Being older, I don't know if they escaped from. There's a preserve over the mountain, so could they have been elk or actual reindeer that escaped from that preserve and made their way up there? But it's a small town, it's a small mountain. You would have heard. Nobody ever say anything. And up there's white deer, so that it's just very weird. And then the second thing was, when I found out Santa wasn't real, okay? So I was very adamant. I'm like, you're kind of lying to me. I believe he's real. And she's like, not this year, that this is the truth. I'm like, okay. So I'm in bed. It's late. And I hear very distantly sleigh bells. And I'm like, what is that? I keep listening, and I hear them. They're getting louder and closer. And you could hear them just going over the house. Well, I run out of my room and into my mom's room, and I'm like, do you hear that? Do you the TV lowered, the TV on, like that was her religion. She lowers the TV. She's just like listening. I'm like, oh, Santa. I'm like, I told you he's real. Let's go outside and look. She's like, no, we're not going. I mean, she was white, and she was like, you could tell she was terrified. I'm like, but do you hear it? She's like, I hear it. And there was no, and it passed overhead, and you could hear it just going the other way. So when I got with my boyfriend, I had randomly told him, I'm like, this one time I heard Santa's sleigh bells. I'm like, he's going to think I'm crazy. He's like, I heard them too. Because he lived down from the mountain. So they would have been coming from this way over towards the mountain. And he said, I had heard them too. He's like, I don't remember when, but I heard them too. And I just stared at him. He's like, I've heard them. I never heard them again, but I heard them that one time. And I'm like, so I'm not crazy. He's like, no, because I heard them. So it makes you wonder, what was that? I've never heard it since.
Right.
You know,
No, I think that's
I can still clearly hear it. Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's just fascinating because on the one hand, like you've got this bizarre phenomenon that is clearly at least like associated with this holiday, or at least, like a fictionalized or supposedly fictionalized part of this holiday. And then on the other hand, it in order for it to, I guess, work as a sort of proof, of some sort of reality, like behind the myths themselves, like you would expect to be able to see the phenomenon behaving in a way that is consistent with what you would expect, like if, say, for instance, Santa is real. So like if Santa is real and was, driving a team of 8 tiny reindeer, pulling his sleigh through the sky, and, and people were hearing his bells and stuff, like I would expect for there to be, Santa sightings, which there are, interestingly enough, but I would also expect, something like anomalous presence showing up, people reporting strange gifts. Although, interestingly enough, I have had one report of that. Well, kind of. And so I think what we would want to look for here is some kind of evidence that could act as any kind of confirmation. Interestingly enough, like I just mentioned, I do have one report that I received from a young woman who said that she had seen Santa's sleigh when she was younger. So this actually comes from Haley Pierce, who was 24 at the time she actually reported this to me, which would have been last year. But at the time of her sighting, she was much younger, right around 8. And so this took place in Lancaster, Ohio, on Christmas Eve. And what I'd like to do is I'll just read her report as she gave it to me. So what she said was, when I was a kid, when I was a kid, I absolutely believed in Santa Claus as much as a kid possibly could. So much so, in fact, that I wanted to be Santa when I grew up. I believed in Santa a lot later than I probably should have. I was in 6th grade before I finally lost the spirit. And I think a lot of that has to do with my experience. I was probably 8 years old. We were leaving the 11 p.m. Christmas Eve service at our church in Lancaster, Ohio. I had been obsessively tracking Santa on the NORAD website all day and was looking forward to getting home so I could crawl into bed and stay up as late as possible, listening for sleigh bells or hooves on our roof like I did every year. I was the first person out of the church when the service was over, because what little kid wants to stay in church on Christmas Eve, which is a fair point. It was a clear, cold night, and the stars were gorgeous. So I was admiring the stars when I saw a kind of shimmering out of the corner of my eye. I looked and saw what I can only describe as Santa's sleigh. It looked just like it does in every movie. It was pulled by reindeer, and it left a trail of glowing glitter behind it that faded quickly. I don't remember if I heard sleigh bells or not. It happened so fast, but I was absolutely sure of what I saw. I kind of stood there in shock until my parents came out. I told them what I had seen, and they basically said, well, we'd better get home and get to bed so he doesn't skip our house. Over the years, I kind of began to doubt my sighting, chalked it up to a shooting star and wishful thinking. But as I've gotten older and become more open-minded about the nature of the universe and the paranormal, I've accepted my experience for what it was. It was Santa's sleigh. And so there's a lot that's interesting about that, obviously. I did ask her some follow-up questions. She said that she couldn't see anybody inside the sleigh. and couldn't make out, any details of them or the way. But, it was far away, and it happened pretty fast. Um, and she hadn't experienced any other unusual phenomena around that time. And so it's something of a mystery, frankly. It's so bizarre because, again, on the one hand, you have this sighting report from a reliable, credible person who has seen something that is seemingly impossible.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's not completely behaving in a way that you would expect something like that to behave if it really was representative of this myth sort of come to life. There are lots of people. Well, I should say there are some people within the paranormal community, which is probably a very tiny fraction of the overall population of the actual world. So some people believe that sightings of Santa or the Easter Bunny, which I have at least 2 Easter Bunny sightings that people have sent in, are representative of a thought form, something created out of human belief. And I think that's a very interesting idea. It sort of explains some things, but doesn't really, even as a thought exercise, doesn't really work as a perfect explanation. So if you've got something that has been created out of human belief, like one, you would expect that thing. Let's say that we were able to conjure Santa out of the human subconscious and power of belief, right? Now you would expect that this thought form wouldn't know that it's a thought form. It wouldn't go, "Oh man, I came out of human belief." No, it would have to think that what it was really Santa Claus, right? Because otherwise it just doesn't work. Just logically just doesn't make sense. Like it would have to believe that it really is Santa Claus, and then you would expect it to do more Santa Claus things, right? For lack of a better phrasing, you would expect to see, I don't know, something like anomalous gifts, or even like some sort of like interaction, even like from out of popular media. Like Santa Claus coming down the chimney and talking to children and telling them to go back to sleep, and then disappearing in a twinkle of fairy dust, or something similar. But we don't really get that. Like you don't get a lot of reports like that. You get stuff like yours, where it's sort of phantom sleigh bells, and you get stuff like Haley's sighting, where it's this sort of sleigh just riding by. And I don't know, I think some people might explain that by saying, well, if it is a thought form, even if it does believe that it's the real Santa, which it probably should, it's sort of limited in what it can do. And so you only get, these sort of minor phenomena out of this larger phenomenon. So, the power of belief was only strong enough to summon phantom sleigh bells in your case, or a sleigh flying by in Haley's case. And then alternatively, I think the other competing paranormal explanation for this would be something like an induced hallucination. And I don't mean like, people are just imagining it, or hallucinating. I mean, something wanted her to see that sleigh specifically. You know what I mean? If you're into UFOs and alien abduction, you're certainly familiar with the idea of screen memories. And so, like that's something that we should consider. There are stories of kids waking up, on Christmas Eve or early Christmas morning to see a figure like Santa. But there's not a lot of like interaction in the sort of way that I would expect, especially if it's out, coming out of human belief. Like that belief would be strongly influenced by popular media, and so you would expect this figure to act more like the cinematographic version, right? Or
Yeah.
cinematographic. There we go. That's the word I want. Um, the cinematographic version of Santa, and you don't get much of that. What you get is like kids waking up and seeing this strange man in their house, or sometimes, like I mentioned before, you'll have kids seeing a giant bunny, hopping around, and that's about it,
That's disturbing.
And so, right. And so that makes me wonder if perhaps this isn't some other phenomenon taking our own cultural, icons and superimposing them over whatever is actually happening as a way to sort of mask that event. I don't know that's true, but given what we have right now, I need more evidence before I would support the thought form hypothesis versus something like in induced hallucination to try to mask something else. Given, like I said, just this overall lack of supporting evidence.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, like in my case, and you have to wonder what was going on in like that girl's case who saw the sleigh and everything. Like in my case, I was just finding out that he wasn't real. I was losing that magic, and my mom, she was obviously older. She didn't believe. She knew he wasn't real. And then you had somebody like 4 miles away who heard it. So it just it makes you wonder what's happening in everyone's life at that point to cause them to see it, or what's maybe waiting in the wings, kind of like, this is the moment, and if I do this, if I mimic something they're all thinking about, maybe there's some type of energy I can feed off of. I mean, if it's not the real thing, because it just doesn't make sense to me. I know whatever. Today, it still disturbs me thinking because it was just her,
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that regardless, human belief plays a very crucial role in this. So if it is some sort of phenomenon powered by human consciousness, then yeah, I mean, obviously, a belief is a very central component to that. But also, if it's something, trying to manipulate our perception in some way, well, then, again, human belief plays a very strong role in that as well, because it's taking things out of our minds, frankly, out of our cultures that we either already believe in or at least want to believe in, and using that as a way to manipulate us in some way. Now, I saw something flash up on the screen here about a group of ghost hunters who, what was it? Invented a personal history for a ghost in a haunted house. And in a few days, other ghost hunters were reporting a new ghost here that fit the description they had created. And that's fascinating stuff. And I'm certainly not going to say that I think the idea of thought forms in general are impossible, because I definitely don't think that. I think that there is some interesting reports out there of things like exactly what Nancy here is talking about, where you've got spirits and entities that are seemingly conjured out of our own imaginations. I think John Keel sort of famously wrote about the inventor of the popular pulp. I can't talk. Pulp comic book.
It's okay.
Character, the Shadow. Actually, after his passing, having his house haunted by this pulp action radio and comic character that he had created, which is very, very interesting. And so something like that, I think it's very easy to believe that there is a very necessary component of human consciousness and belief involved in that particular phenomenon. I just think that it's very easy for us to fall into an explanation like thought forms that are very difficult, if not impossible, to prove, given our current level of scientific understanding and technology. And so I think we have to be open to alternative explanations when it comes to things like sightings of mythical holiday entities. I think it's one thing to entertain thought forms as a thought exercise or even a hypothesis. But we really have to be open to other possibilities, because at the end of the day, we just frankly don't know. And so what I would be interested in finding out from anybody who has had, one of these holiday encounters is, have you had any other paranormal experiences in your life? If you have, of what nature? Like, interestingly enough, when I asked Haley that, she talked about, now she didn't have anything around that time, but throughout her life, she has had 3 different UFO encounters, including one where her and everyone in her family saw a black triangle. And so it's interesting to me that at the age of 8 years old, she sees Santa's sleigh, but then goes on to have 3 more traditional UFO sightings throughout her life so far, and she's not very old.
Right.
She's only in her mid-20s, and so when you look at that holistically, you look at all of it together. What I see is a pattern of UFO encounters, rather than one magical thought form encounter and then 3 UFO sightings. And so what makes more sense to me in this specific instance would be, if UFOs or the entities behind them have a particular interest in this individual for some reason. I think it stands to reason to me that her first sighting very easily could have been masked as something else, for whatever otherworldly motivations that we can only guess at. And that's the kind of rationality I would like to see used when examining like these phenomena.
Right. And see, what gets me too is like, so that happened to her at age 8, and I was about 8 or 9 when it happened to me, and it just those one times. But you had all these years leading up to it, believing in this, this figure, and nothing. There was never any other sightings, any other sounds, and it's just those one moments that you have, and you hear it. It just, like you said, maybe it is a screen memory, because then afterwards, like, which is weird that you say that. When I was a teenager, we lived in a different town, and we were going into the local Kmart. When we were going into the Kmart, there was a cigar-shaped something. I don't know what it was, to be honest. It was above the Kmart, and it was vibrating. And I had said to my mom, I'm like, look. And there was a man and a woman off to would be my left. And they were calm, but everyone was talking. They didn't, they just like were looking at it and just kept talking. And then there was my mom. I'm like, look. And she looked at it, and she stopped, and she looked, and she's like, let's go. And she grabbed me by my arm and just dragged me into the store. And it's like, we're not going out. We're going to do our shopping. We're not talking about it. I'm like, but didn't you see that? And she's like, I saw it. You saw it. That's it. We're not talking about it anymore. okay. And that was it. Right a few years later, when I was in my late 20s, she had told me that when she was little, she was chased a UFO. And she said, God with her, chased around the house, ran into the house. They told, her father, her mother, his parents. They went outside. There's like nothing. You kids are crazy. And she's like, I know what we saw. And I'm like, it was like the one above the Kmart. She looked at me and she's like, what one above the Kmart? I'm like, I know I'm not crazy. You don't remember that? She's like, no. She's like, I remember going in that day, but I don't remember seeing anything. It was the weirdest thing. So you saying that just makes me wonder.
Yeah,
So
I mean, oh, sorry.
it's okay.
Oh,
No, well, I know we're on the delay, so it's okay.
no, I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, I just, like I said, I think it's really important to examine the entire breadth of a witness or experiencer's sightings or encounters before really trying to decide exactly, what is going on with them. So like in your case, you've got this history then of UFO sightings, and then one sleigh bell, in encounter, and I guess at that point, what makes more sense, um, that there was for whatever reason some other sound being masked by sleigh bells, and certainly like there is no shortage of weird sounds associated with the UFO phenomenon. So I can't say for certain. Of course, I have to remain open minded no matter what.
Yeah.
But it just seems odd to me to isolate those particular experiences, especially since they don't really seem to belong to, I guess, their own phenomenon, in the sense that they don't repeat. Like you said, you had this one-off, you know, instance of hearing sleigh bells, but you never heard them again, and you didn't,
No.
ever see Santa or hear reindeer on your roof or anything else. And interestingly enough, your boyfriend had heard the same thing. So who's to say that there wasn't some sort of anomalous craft or something, some phenomenon that just happened to travel over that area in that day, and decided that it was going to manipulate the consciousnesses of everybody in that area, or at least the people who could perceive it, into hearing sleigh bells instead of whatever noise it was actually making. Makes as much sense as
And I mean,
as
he's
anything.
yeah, and he's never had like a real experience other than maybe a few one-offs where he still sits there and tries to explain it out. And he's very skeptical. Like he's like, there's always a logical answer until he can't figure out the logical answer. And then he's like, well, I know, but he even sits there and goes, I heard the sleigh bells. I don't know what they are. And it also, like going back to the UFO thing, I had seen there was another one about, I would say, I think last year, because I have pictures because I was outside with my son, and it looked like a blimp. It looked like a silver blimp going past, and I had been talking to him, and I said, why didn't you tell me, like, the blimp there, because every now and then the blimp does fly around. Like, why didn't you tell me a blimp was flying around? Because I would have made sure we were watching. He's like, there's no blimp. He's like, there's nothing taking off in the airport. I'm like, I saw it. I'm like, I'm looking right at it. I took a picture, but it just went past. And he's like, oh, okay. I look up again for some reason, and it's just like it's coming back the other way, really slow, kind of like, here I am. And I'm like, I have to let you go. And he's like, why? I'm like, I'm going to take pictures. There's just something out right. So as soon as I hung up and I went to take pictures, it went back the other way it came, and it just started circling and going up, and it was just the weirdest thing. And I screamed for my kid to come up out of the yard because I got the worst feeling. So it's like a gut feeling like something bad was going to happen. But I've never seen that since. And I could send them to you if you want. They're very strange pictures, and it's not a normal airplane. We get airplanes around here all the time. It's not an airplane. It's very odd. So I don't know if that would be I don't know if that would be related to it, but I can't say. But that freaked me out very bad too.
Sure. I mean, generally speaking, just in my experience of working with witnesses, and of course, like the weird things I have experienced on my own, it's unusual for me to speak to a witness who has had multiple instances of some kind of paranormal phenomena in their life, and not have those phenomena be related in some way, and so like I said before, like you look at Haley's experiences, and I think it would be remiss of us to say that she had one Santa's sleigh sighting and 3 UFO sightings, when really the most accurate way, like the most accurate way you can explain that is she had 4 UFO sightings, frankly. Going by the strictest definition of UFO, which is the only one I like, of being an unidentified flying object. So yeah, she didn't see Santa's sleigh and then 3 UFOs. She's seen 4 UFOs. And so, I find that to be, like I said, pretty similar across the board. Even, with people who have said that they have lived in a haunted house and then, gone on to experience something else, be that something in the UFO field, or something else in the cryptid world or similar. So much of the phenomena between those aspects of the larger paranormal picture are so similar that at least the way people tend to experience them, have connections throughout their life. And so, I think that we have to be willing to look at them holistically, and not try to separate them out, and put them in these little categories, because I think that that's not getting us any closer to really understanding it. I can try to give you an example here. So, I talked to, and this isn't very Christmassy, but it does kind of speak to what I'm talking about. There was a woman up in Rogers, Minnesota, I talked to a couple of years ago, named Olga. And she wanted to get a hold of me because of some shadow person sightings that she had in her house. And so I talked to her about the shadow people sightings, and they were pretty weird, and well, as they are wont to be, right? And so, as it turned out, at least one of these entities seemed to be watching her grandson Toby while he slept, which was weird. And then I asked her about other, phenomena that might be happening in their home, or it might have happened to other family members. And she tells me about, some anomalous lights. And, she tells me about how her son had also experienced some weird stuff while he was in bed. Like, it felt like somebody was sitting on his bed with him. And she had actually experienced something, seeing a weird light in bed too. And so what was interesting to me about that was, regardless of what they were experiencing, there was at least this one commonality of being in bed. Now, not everything happened while they were in bed, but enough of it did where I couldn't ignore it, And so it's commonalities like that I normally look for. Now, some people might have tried to put those in separate boxes and been like, okay, well, you've got, some shadow people phenomenon. You've got this ghost phenomenon in the sitting on the bed, and you've got this UFO phenomenon in the anomalous lights. But that kind of senseless categorization doesn't really get us any closer. Well, really examining the commonalities, I think might. So if you look at, for instance, the experiences like they've had while in bed, like you can start to look at the similarities, right? Like, so altered states of consciousness, for instance, even if you're like being asleep, of course, is an altered state of consciousness, but so is falling asleep, so is waking up, so is highway hypnosis, meditation. Like there are lots of different altered states of consciousness that we enter into, sometimes without knowing it. And there seems to be a definite link between that and people having paranormal experiences, and so I think it's that kind of stuff that you miss out on if you try to take everything that has some kind of superficial difference and separate it completely from everything else, and not try to look for commonalities between these seemingly disparate phenomena, which again is why if somebody comes to me with a holiday story, as cool as it would be, and as much as I want to believe in some kind of objective truth to Santa Claus as well, even if it's just as a thought form, I have to look at the entirety of their experience, encounter in the totality of their experiences, just like I would any other case that ever crosses my desk. Bernadette, I can't hear you for some reason. I'm not sure.
Okay,
why.
can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. I think
Okay.
anyone who would bring their story to you, or any other investigator like that, they're looking for the truth, and they want you to dig into it. They want you to be that way and try to help them, not just be like, oh yeah, you saw Santa. It's a thought form. You're okay. No, they want you to dig for it. So I totally agree with you. So I have a couple questions for you. Do you mind taking questions? Okay.
No, yeah.
So Vincent. Okay, Vincent wants to know, what about Elf on the Shelf? Is that a new take on an old tradition?
Elf on a Shelf. I think it's largely just more commercialization of beloved Christmas tropes, but it does at least speak to this persistent association of this time of year with being judged. I mean, that's been happening forever. Even Santa today still has that aspect to him where, he knows who has been naughty. He knows who has been nice. If you've been nice, you get presents. If you've been naughty, you get a lump of coal. And that goes, all the way back to Odin, judging people, during Yule. And so while the elf itself, might be reminiscent of, of a friendly household spirit like the Nisser, for instance, it doesn't really speak to a specific, tradition, in that, I don't think whoever invented it was saying, okay, well, I'm going to update this sort of traditional belief, for the 21st century. I think it was just a way to start a new tradition and make some money, while sort of playing on and reinforcing some beliefs that are already associated with this time of year.
Like some being is watching you the entire season, just like Santa's watching you the entire season. So
yeah. I mean, people are already used to being judged on Christmas or around Christmas, and so instead of it being Santa, you market it as this elf and say, oh, he's going to watch you for Santa, you know.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, I don't think it has anything
Yeah,
more to do with that. Certainly, there isn't some ancient belief of which I am aware of, you know, an elf that hangs around your house and judges you on behalf of Odin or Santa or anybody else.
that's good to know. Was Santa considered an elf king? Nancy Malcolm wants to know.
Okay, so very very interesting. Now, as I touched on before, now there is some association between Odin and elves, but the actual lord of the elves in the Germanic tradition was Freyr, and he was a Vanir god of fertility, and he's not really associated with Yule at all. And so I think that there has been some conflation, perhaps, you know, between Odin and Freyr because of the association of, you know, Nisser and then later, you know, Santa's elves with this time of year. And so, you know, I mean, when you look at, say, like, for instance, Odin in the Norse tradition, you know, he was the king of the gods. Certainly, he was known as the All Father. You know, you could make the argument that there really wasn't much that, you know, he wasn't, you know, lord over in his way. But no, he wasn't specifically, you know, in Elf King or anything like that. I think that, like I said, that's something that's just been conflated between those two characters because of the later addition of elves into the Santa legend.
And I have one more question from Vincent. What about that scary Krampus?
Can't believe I didn't talk about Krampus. Everybody loves Krampus. He is super hot right now.
Yeah.
No,
I've seen some of those parades. They are scary. Like, I don't think I would want to go to one of those parades. They're scary.
Right. No. Well, yeah. I mean, he's a very popular character these days, which is surprising to me because he's the last person you would ever want to have show up, you know, at your house because he has nothing but bad news. So Krampus's origins are a little murky, which is something we run into with this all the time because the fact is there weren't good written records, you know, prior to Christian conversion in any of these cultures. You know, like my ancestors are like Norse and Anglo-Saxon and Celtic, and we didn't keep any written records until, you know, post-conversion, like, and monks started writing things down. And so the origins of Krampus are kind of difficult to parse out, but there are a lot of scholars who believe that he might have some pre-Christian origins near, like, Austria in the Alpine region. And so basically what he is as a character, well, what he's developed into as a character is the opposite of Saint Nick. You know, so Saint Nick is said to come around on the evening of December 5th, and he'll leave presents for kids and stuff. And then on December 6th, you have the feast of Saint Nicholas. However, on December 4th, if you have been bad, around comes Krampus. And so Krampus is this devilish looking figure. You know, he is hirsute. He's got big horns and sharp teeth and a long devilish tongue and goat's hooves. And he carries a basket on his back and a bunch of birch switches. And if you have been a bad kid, he is going to beat you with those switches. And if you've been bad enough, he will beat you with. I know, right? If you've been bad enough, he will not only beat you with those switches, but he will throw you in his basket and take you with him back to the underworld, which I assume it does not make for a very Merry Christmas whatsoever. So, but
I'll just take the coal. I'm okay with the coal. No, I don't need any of that. But no, that's very disturbing. So when he because I don't know much about the legend. Does he just take you to the underworld and that's it, or does anything else happen to you once you get to the underworld?
Presumably, he would take you there and keep you, and maybe like I assume you'd be enslaved or continuously beaten with birch switches or something. I mean, this is not a thing that has ever been documented to really happen to someone. So, I mean, we can only
That's
guess,
good. Yeah.
right? Well, I mean, it's interesting. There are a lot of reasons for stories like this to exist. And one of them is to teach valuable moral lessons, or to get children to behave. But another reason might be to explain things that we can't otherwise explain. And so yeah, Krampus is useful for saying, well, hey, you better go to bed and behave, or Krampus is going to come get you, or you better be good this year, or Krampus is going to come get you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in the case of, say, a child that has gone missing, which wouldn't be unheard of, especially this time of year. If you think back centuries, this was a very dark, very dangerous, very deadly time of year. If a kid wandered out into a blizzard or something, who knows? You might never see him again. And so there are stories of children being abducted by various entities, and I have to wonder if some of these stories don't also serve the role of some kind of explanation when otherwise there just isn't one. I mean, as human beings, we long for closure, we long for rationality, we need things to make sense in some way. And so we will in the absence of any sort of explanation or sense to be had out of a situation, we'll just invent something, because that's how much we need things to make sense.
I think we're wired that way, that we need that closure, that some of us even strive to get that closure no matter what the cost on certain things. So I totally agree. Have you had any reports of modern, like, people actually seeing Krampus just like they see Santa or hear Santa? Have you had any reports of that?
No, I haven't. Every once in a while we'll get a sort of like traditional, like devil or demon sighting. Those are pretty rare, frankly. But nothing specifically, to do with Krampus. I would think that adherence to the thought form hypothesis would probably explain that away as saying that, like, Krampus hasn't achieved that level of popularity. Although, if you were to support the induced hallucination or screen memory hypothesis, you could make the exact same argument, basically saying that, like, he's not a popular enough character for a phenomenon to want to use him as a mask for something else.
Right. And that'd be interesting to see in the years to come, with like the popularity of the parades and just the random stuff that I've seen with Krampus, to see if it grows and there are, maybe thought forms or like you said, the hallucinations or whatever, that he pops up somewhere. That's going to be interesting to see. So if there's any other stories you want to...
I look forward to getting those.
Yeah, right. I look forward to hearing them. So if you have any other stories you want to tell us, because we've come to the end of our hour, so I appreciate it. But if you have anything else.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, honestly, anything else that I have would probably take way too long. So why don't we save it for next time? I'm always happy to come on and talk about this stuff. So
I would love for you to come back, especially when your new book's out. So if you want to plug that and your website or anything else you're doing, feel free to do so.
Oh, sure. So for now, why don't I just tell people where they can find us? If you're interested in the Singular Fortean Society, of course, we're all over social media. So you can find us on Facebook and Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, TikTok. Or if you want to go directly to our website, the URL is singularfortean.com. You can find links to purchase my books on there. I've got the Lake Michigan Mothman, High Strangeness in the Midwest, and Strange Tales of the Impossible. And then the book I'm working on now is the Singular Fortean Society's Yuletide Guide to High Strangeness. Look for that in 2023.
Oh, I'm excited. Marla actually said when you come back, she wants you to bring your dog with you too. I agree.
She's literally right here. She fell asleep like halfway through, and she's just been conked out the entire time.
I can hear her snoring.
Oh.
I can hear her snoring. So yeah, definitely, she's always welcome. Any of your animals are always welcome on the show. Trust me, we loved it.
Awesome.
But I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much, and I look forward to having you back, Tobias. Thank you so much for, and you have a good night.
Thanks for having me. All right, take care.
Happy holidays. Bye. What a great show. So I want to thank you all for joining me and sticking around. I also want to remind you next week at 11 p.m., Vincent will have his show V. And then this Friday, I will not be having a show, but it'll be a combined show with Lon and Vincent and some other guests. We will be doing our Christmas episode. So that is going to be really great. And I'm looking forward to it. So for now, have a good night and happy holidays. Bye, everyone.